All right, good evening to everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order and welcome you to the March 13th, 2023 meeting of the Falls Church City Council. We're delighted you're here with us this evening. I'd ask that you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Madam Clerk, will you call roll, please?
Yes, sir. Ms. Conley?
Here.
Mr. Duncan?
Here.
Ms. Hardy?
Here.
Ms. Leon?
Here.
Ms. Shantz-Hiscott?
Here.
Mr. Snyder?
Here.
And Mayor Tarter.
All right, yes, I'm here.
Yes.
Okay,
And we
thank
do
you.
have Ms. Hardy participating remotely, and I believe you have a motion in front of you.
All right, would anyone like to make such a motion?
I appear to have that motion in front of me now. Ms. Harder, could you identify the remote location and reason for your participation by electronic means?
I am in Austin, Texas on personal travel.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I move the City Council approve electronic participation by Letty Hardy in this meeting for personal reasons pursuant to City Council's policy for remote participation in City Council meetings as adopted by Resolution 2023-01.
Second.
Mr. Snyder on the second, Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy? Oh, nope. You don't get to vote on that. Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz-Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yeah.
And Mayor Tarter.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0, and Ms. Hardy may participate from a remote location.
All right, from a secret remote location. Okay. So let's go on to adoption of the meeting agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt the meeting agenda.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. So we have several special proclamations this evening. Various members of council will be reading them. The first one is a proclamation declaring March 15th, 2023 as Equal Pay Day in the city. And Ms. Leon is going to go ahead and read that proclamation.
Happy to. Whereas more than 50 years after the passage of the Equal Pay Act and Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, women and people of color continue to suffer the consequences of inequitable pay differentials. And whereas for over 25 years, Equal Pay Day has helped draw attention to gender-based pay disparities by highlighting how far into a new year a woman must work, on average, to earn what a man did in the previous year. And whereas this year, Equal Pay Day falls on March 14th, the earliest the occasion has ever been marked, and whereas the progress made toward achieving pay fairness should be celebrated, we should not be satisfied until Equal Pay Day is no longer necessary. And whereas, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, in 2020, the average woman working full-time year-round earned 83 cents for every dollar paid to their average male counterpart, and the disparities are even greater for Black, Native American, Latina, and certain subpopulations of Asian women when compared to white men. And whereas the pay gap reflects discrimination as well as barriers that women face in accessing good-paying jobs and meeting caregiving responsibilities, including a lack of affordable childcare and paid family and medical leave, which often prevent women from joining and staying in the workforce. And whereas over a working lifetime, this wage disparity costs the average American woman and her family $700,000 to $2 million in lost wages, impacting Social Security benefits and pensions. And whereas addressing the barriers that have long held women back from full participation and fair treatment in the workforce strengthens the security of families today and eases future retirement costs while enhancing the overall economy. And whereas Tuesday, March 14th, 2023 symbolizes the time this year in which the wages paid to American women catch up to the wages paid to men from the previous year.
Now, therefore, I, David Tarter, Mayor of the City of Falls Church, Virginia, do hereby proclaim March 14th, 2023 as Equal Pay Day in the City of Falls Church and urge the community to recognize the full value of women's skills and significant contributions to the labor force, and further encourage businesses to conduct an internal pay evaluation to ensure women are being paid fairly. All right, thank you. Is anyone in the audience here to receive this proclamation? If not, I think we'll all celebrate and do it together. So that's that proclamation. Our next proclamation is regarding Emergency Management Professionals Week. Mr. Snyder, you do the honors?
Sure, thank you very much. Whereas the emergency management teams of the City of Falls Church and the Commonwealth of Virginia work tirelessly behind the scenes to create a safer, stronger, and more resilient city in the midst of natural disasters, pandemics, civil unrest, terrorism, and other man-made and natural threats and hazards. And whereas every emergency begins and ends locally. And whereas emergency management is a vital public service to and between essential services, and emergency managers help the City of Falls Church to prepare for, respond to, and recover from emergencies. And whereas emergency managers develop emergency plans and procedures, organize training for first responders and community partners, manage, lead, and provide skills and resources to minimize the impact of disasters, work with state and federal agencies to find the most effective methods of disaster recovery to increase safety and security and build business continuity. And whereas the role of emergency managers in creating a safer, more resilient community is more important than ever.
Now, therefore, I, David Tarter, Mayor of the City of Falls Church, Virginia, do hereby proclaim March 19th to March 23rd, 2023 as Emergency Management Professionals Week in the City of Falls Church, and urge the community to honor the City of Falls Church Emergency Management Team and to recognize their service behind the scenes and commitment to health, safety, and welfare of all who live and visit in the City of Falls Church. I understand I know we have some folks from that team here with us, Mr. Carter and company. Would you guys like to come forward and receive the proclamation? You're certainly welcome to say a few words if you desire as well. Oh, it's your birthday today. All right, well, somebody's going to sing happy birthday. Who is it? All right, there's the proclamation.
Hopefully not you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Anytime.
Why don't you scoot in the middle here? We'll get a little better symmetry here. All right, congratulations. Thank you for your work and your contributions to our community. All right, the next one's a big one. It's exciting times for the city and Meridian High School. And Ms. Connolly will do the honors on our next proclamation.
I am very excited to read a proclamation declaring March 22nd, 2023 as State Champion Meridian High School Boys Swim and Dive Team Day. Whereas the 2022-2023 Meridian High School Varsity Boys Swim and Dive Team captured the Virginia High School League Class 3A State Championship. And whereas the team dominated the field of 31 teams for the entire state championship meet that was held in Richmond in February. And whereas the entire team, and I will apologize if I pronounce anyone's name wrong, you can correct me if you'd like, because I'd like to get it right. Seniors, Benjamin McCracken, Alex Perez, Carson Ruff, and Wesley Sturgill. Did I say that right? All right, Ruff. Juniors, Matthew Janicki, Jeremy Caton, and Kyle Cuck. Sophomores, Wesley Crawford, Jonathan Caton, Marcus Coomer, Owen Coomer, Connor Tweddle, and Alex Way. Freshmen, Evan Dent, Connor Fleming, Aslan Gadd, Gavin Jones, Hayden Cusick, Zane Kwamsaya, Ashok Radcliffe, Tiberius Schmidl, Ryan Southern, David Thode, Brody Wagner, and Simon Wing worked hard both in the pool and in the classroom, excelled as a unit, and displayed excellent sportsmanship all season. And whereas head coach Leah Kirk provided outstanding leadership with the assistance of assistant coach Michelle Reese and Ryan York, as well as the support of Superintendent Peter Noonan, head of schools Valerie Hardy, associate principal David Sorensis, athletic director Brian Park, administrative assistant to athletics Becky Creed, and athletic trainer Vicki Gallagher. And whereas the team, coaches, parents, and fans relied upon the support of team manager Pennington Petra Jones and photographer Reverend Dr. B. Casey Ramey to win the state championship. And whereas the Falls Church City Council commends these outstanding student athletes on their state championship win.
Now, therefore, I, David Tarter, Mayor of the City of Falls Church, Virginia, do hereby proclaim March 22nd, 2023 as State Champion Meridian High School Boys Swim and Dive Team Day in the City of Falls Church and call on all residents to express congratulations and appreciation for the team's outstanding achievement and championship performance. Congratulations, everyone. Okay, why don't you all come down and we'll take a picture. And if you all want some Falls Church pins, you can have some of those as well. But why don't we get all the student athletes to come on down?
And coaches?
Sure, and the coaches as well? All right. So, next on the agenda is oaths of office. So, are there any oaths of office to administer?
Yes, Mr. John Ferris for the Environmental Sustainability Council is here.
All right. Welcome and thank you and congratulations.
Okay, so just raise your right, whoop. I think I should, maybe I should do it.
We'll hear you too.
I'll stand over here. Raise your right hand. Do you, John Ferris, solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon you as a member of the Environmental Sustainability Council according to the best of your ability, so help you God?
I do. Yes.
Okay, thank you, and thank you so much for your service, and you are ready to continue
Thank you.
on the
Why
board.
don't you come forward? We'll give you our congratulations and thanks, and I'll give you a pin as well if you'd like. So why don't you come forward and we'll get a quick photo.
I know, right? Oh, cool, all right.
Oh,
We
wait,
have
another
another
oath?
oath as well.
Okay.
Got that organized?
Congratulations. Welcome to the ESC. Congratulations, Sam.
And we have Brendan Kelly for the Recreation and Parks Advisory Board. Just want to make sure your mic's on. Perfect. Just raise your right hand, please. Do you, Brendan Kelly, solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon you as a member of the Recreation and Parks Advisory Board, according to the best of your ability, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
All right, and we're ready to assume your duties. Thank you, and you can join Council.
Yeah, come on down. We'll give you our hearty thanks. All right, any other oaths of office, Madam Clerk?
I think we're finished for tonight. Thank you.
All right, let's move on to written comments. Would you like to start with a summary of the written comments, please?
Certainly would. Let's see. The written comments for this evening start with the following, providing copies of their comments from the February 27th, 2023 City Council meeting regarding proposed T-zone changes. And those comments were from Mary Chavez of 215 Lawton Street and Aaron Flynn of 222 Little Falls Street. Peruz Kamalik of 609 Park Avenue also provided comments on the proposed T-zone changes in advance of the City Council's March 6, 2023 work session, and those are included in what was sent to you. In other comments, Erin Flynn of 222 Little Falls Street provided a copy of her comments to the Planning Commission regarding the requested amendment to the Pearson Square special exception and advocated for an extension of affordable dwelling unit expirations. Bike Falls Church provided comments on the discussion of bike infrastructure at the February 22nd Mayor's Agenda meeting with staff. And the following requested protected bike lanes that they be a part of the Park Avenue project. Brandon Blakely and Justine Underhill of 513 Greenwich Street also provided those comments. Anne Marie Vocatoro asked that the city hire a Vietnamese speaking outreach specialist for the East End Small Area Planning Team.
All right, thank you very much. Let's now move on to the receipt of public comment from those who are in the room right now or happen to be on the internet. Madam Clerk, do we have some speakers signed up?
We do. We have 4 speakers signed up this evening, and speakers are asked to limit their comments to 3 minutes, and most of you have done this before, but the timer will be up there and tell you how you're doing on time. First up, we're going to have Fred Thompson of 502 West Broad Street, and he's speaking about the T-zones. And after Mr. Thompson, we'll have Jimmy Jung speaking on the same topic. Let me check your mic.
Thank you very much. Okay, I have some concerns I'd like to express about what happens next in terms of the communication and outreach to the community and how that can be most effective. There was a discussion at the end of the last session, the work session. Councilmember Snyder, Councilmember Mary Beth Conley talked about whether the process was broken or not. And I, having participated in the process for over a year, I have my views on that. But I don't want to belabor that. I am submitting comments, and I'll belabor it there. But what I really want to focus on tonight is really what can be done next, and how do we make this as productive an enterprise as possible. I would say basically, I've been frustrated with the process, and I don't think I'm alone, of basically a 40-minute briefing by the staff followed by a bunch of 3-minute presentations by a lot of people with a diverse list of interests and concerns. I don't think doing that a third time will really give the council much information, and I think it's just going to be more frustrating for the public. I think that we ought to look at ways where we can really get engaged in a two-way dialogue and conversation about what can be done to be done better, and I think, and I have some suggestions. I'm making some suggestions around that. First of all, let me speak specifically to the Broadway. I will be this week submitting to the clerk and to the council a statement on what we think would work well for us to be a transition behind us and to be a transition to the community. And we'll be providing some more specific ideas and suggestions about what that should be. Secondly, I have invited at an Ask the Council meeting well back all council members to come to the Broadway, get a feel of the actual environment, understand why we have the concerns we have. 3 council members, Mr. Snyder, Mayor Tarter, Councilmember Leon, have actually come to, and I think it really helps you to understand where we're coming from, why we keep showing up at these meetings, why we have these concerns, and you know, it should be. I would hope it could be part of what you bring to decide this. So I want to make sure the rest of the council members know you're invited. 15 minutes, we'll walk around the property. I'll show you what our concerns are, and it's just one more thing you might be able to consider. A traditional town hall, a political town hall, is when the people advocating, like a political official, will make a presentation and then take questions from the public. There really hasn't been any opportunity to question the council or to hear from the council. And so I would ask that, that we do that. And I would also ask that when we frame the dialogue for these upcoming town hall, that we do it in a way that skips the detailed briefing of things that have gone on for 6 months and focuses on the real issues before the council now, so that we can have a real discussion of those. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have Jimmy Jung, followed by Joseph Shirizi. And just state your address, please.
Jimmy Jung, 203 North Lee Street. I'm done.
Yeah, thank you, though.
But I'm going to end up repeating a lot of what Fred said. I was able to dial in through hotel Wi-Fi last week and listen to the first reading, and I heard a certain dichotomy in what was being said. A few folks are like, we need to really engage with the community, and then other folks are saying, no, you can see that the comments of the citizens have been incorporated in what we have now. And that discrepancy kind of caught my ear. Fred's right. These little 3-minute speeches are really, I don't know, limited in their utility. The best discussion we had was actually the League of Women Voters meeting, except for the fact that it ended with when Mr. Stoddard said, okay, now I've educated you and you can go talk to other people. I'm not taking any comments back. So that was a discussion. It didn't seem to take much longer than the kind of meetings that we have late in the night here. So that seemed to be perhaps a better approach, because there is a misunderstanding about what's going on. The perception, for example, that this has anything to do with affordable housing, when several of you guys have told me that it just plain doesn't. You've said that in meetings, you've said that to me, but that is allowed to go on. And Fred's right. There's no one for the council that's advocating for this that can stand up and say, well, this is what we're really trying to get to. Instead, Mr. Stoddard or one of those guys is put in that position, and it's not really their initiative. The perception on this side of the podium is that we spent 4 months, citizens spent 4 months talking to the Planning Commission, getting very, very small concessions, and then all in the last moments, it went away because 4 letters from developers, one of whom was significantly not disinterested, showed up to wipe all that progress away. That little bit of communication we had with them was blown away. My understanding is this started in the Economic Development Committee, which is chaired, again, by a developer. This is that letter from the developer wiped away everything that the citizens had hoped to gain from that conversation. So yes, the perception on this side is absolutely that this is being led by developers. Whether that's reality or perception or not, that's certainly what it appears to be. And that things like housing will be allowed to, act as a Trojan horse for what essentially is an effort to make life easier for developers. I do want you guys to consider that as you try to outreach to the community. I thank you guys for your service, which is basically volunteer service for these crazy late hours you keep. But as you communicate with the citizens, please try to keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We have Joseph Shirizi, followed by Aaron Flynn. And please state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Joseph Shirizi. I live on Gundry Drive in Falls Church. I'm here to talk about housing a little bit and also street safety, my 2 favorite pastimes. So the first one is on West Allendale Road, but behind the Harris Teeter, next to Big Chimneys Park. There used to be a button that you press to make bright yellow blinking lights, and that has been removed. And now I was told a while ago a new one would be put there. It's been months. Little old ladies carry their groceries and get cut off by cars every day. It's next to a bus stop. There's probably hundreds of kids crossing the park to get to the apartments there every single day. I think it's one of the most important flashing crosswalks in the city. And I personally moved to the neighborhood after walking around that area and feeling really safe because of flashing lights like that. And being legally blind at night, I'm actually scared to walk home from city council tonight, and I hope I don't get run over there. So please prioritize that. It's really important to me, and a lot of kids that use that park. Second, I think we have a community engagement at the East End Area Plan event this upcoming week, and I think it would be an absolute mistake if there's not a Vietnamese translator there, not just translated documents and translated all the text, but actually somebody who can speak. And I really hope that the council can, hire a contractor for that going forward for all future meetings involving the area. It's so important for equity. It's so important for, this community engagement that everyone actually understands what is happening. I think they were going to hear a lot of concerns about displacement. I'm not going to say the word gentrification because I don't think it has a very clear definition, but the displacement of existing Falls Church residents that have lived here for a long time is really unacceptable to me, and just speaks to, the racist legacy that Falls Church has of displacing minority groups. And I would think that in 2023, we would want to do better. So I hope that the council can take that seriously and think about why are people priced out? Why are people priced out from new developments, from their homes? Because they can't afford to live there anymore. It's very simple. And the reason people can't afford to live there is we're not meeting the housing needs of our community right now. The way to do that isn't concentrating all of the development in a few small places. It's spreading it out everywhere. And if duplexes were legalized everywhere across the city, we wouldn't have to displace some people to build, really high buildings in one small area. So the way to fight gentrification, the way to fight displacement is really spreading out the density across more of the city. So I hope that this year we can work on some more plans to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And our final speaker who signed up is Erin Flynn.
Hi, I'm Erin Flynn, 222 Little Falls Street. At your February 27th meeting, I asked that council renew a number of outstanding requests at your work session on T-zones, including, among others, enlisting the city arborist and city stormwater staff and getting illustrations of those parcels most likely to be redeveloped and at the parameters being discussed. As to the former Vice Mayor Hardy stated that the city arborist was consulted in connection with the Urban Forestry Commission's recommendation for a 15% tree canopy requirement. But beyond that, the commission recommended that the planning staff consult the arborist and stormwater staff regarding maximum lot coverage, setbacks, and impervious surface maximums. And for your convenience, I've sent Celeste a copy of those recommendations with my remarks for tonight. To date, I don't believe those consultations have occurred. Planning Commissioner Friedlander publicly inquired at the January 25th work session whether stormwater staff had been consulted, and it hadn't. And I'd renew my request that the Planning Division enlist the expertise of the arborist and the stormwater staff in connection with the T-zone proposal. The parcels on 600, the 600 and 700 blocks of Park Avenue seem like an ideal place to begin for purposes of informing any revised proposal. Separately, as to renderings, yes, there have been graphics of boxes at 40% and 80% lot coverage, and a building at 45 feet and one at 50 feet with a 10-foot step back. On February 15th, Commissioner Friedlander and Chair Stevens agreed that block studies that depict the proposed changes alongside the surroundings are important to gauging the effects of this proposal and whether the city is landing at the right parameters. And I've included in the copy I've provided to Celeste minute marks where those comments are made. This was also a request Commissioner Teets repeatedly raised on the commission while she was on the commission. I'd again ask that those illustrations be undertaken in connection with any public outreach and to inform the specifics of any revised proposal. Finally, I raised the need for meaningful public engagement on T-zones, the East End Plan, and the Great Streets project. Mr. Shields subsequently informed council that the 60% Great Streets design had been submitted for VDOT review without having circled back to the community despite broad public interest at the 30% design phase. Many people, including the CACT, have been taken aback because the city has before said that the designs are largely cemented at 60%. I would again urge council to think about whether the city is meaningfully engaging the public on important planning issues. I'd also ask council to seek to implement a cohesive design on Park Avenue from North Washington to West Street instead of treating the Great Streets project and T-zones as separate items. The transportation issues, including pedestrian and cyclist safety, parking, and whether to have bike boulevards or dedicated bike lanes should be considered for the street as a whole, regardless of the existence of funding for only one portion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other folks in the audience or on the internet who wish to speak at this time? Okay, we're going to move on to council requests. Are there any council requests? Mr. Snyder.
Yeah, I do. I think there were requests for consultations with various city experts, the arborist and others, and I'd ask that that occur. Also, at our last work session, I asked for drawings to represent the maximum build-out of the current proposals, and I'd reiterate that request. Thank you.
Other, Ms. Leon?
Mr. Shields, it's wonderful to hear about the community engagement at Meeting Center, but it is a good point to have a translator there. Do we have any plans to support that?
Yes, we certainly will have a translator at the pop-ups that are scheduled, and we have had translator services at prior community events for this as well, and we'll continue to do that.
Okay. And lastly, I think on T-zones, I just want to reiterate the request. I think several other on council were with the notion of making sure that in advance of our next discussion on this, that staff perform some basic calculations around what, based on the setbacks on front, rear, and the side, right? Whether the feasibility of that actually works out. Okay, thank you.
And also, let me be clear, we're having interpreting services at the pop-ups at the Eden Center, as well as the documents are being translated. As my mother-in-law was an interpreter, I've been taught of the difference between translating and interpreting, and we will have on-the-spot interpreting services for these pop-ups as well. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Hardy.
Thank you. I had the same request as Caroline on the Eden Center, and actually a step further. So beyond translating or interpreting, I think the request that we had heard from the community is make sure that we actually do outreach and actually get an outreach specialist. Mr. Shields, where are we with that opportunity?
So that is actually in kind of in my inbox to go through the procurement process. We do want to compete for those services and allow members of the community to bring their potential services forward to serve the city as a contractor and outreach. And we're envisioning this as being an engagement that might help the police department, help code officials, help planners, and all sorts of engagement with the Eden Center. So we will not have that specialist on board for the pop-ups, but we will have interpreting services. So it's we just have to go through the steps of procuring those services.
Yeah, because I do think that's an important, function to kind of really build the relationship you said at the Eden Center, not just for the East End Area Plan, but all the other ways that we can better engage that business community, because I do think we're missing that opportunity. I did want to follow up on one of the public comments we heard about the RRFB, the rectangular flashing beacon behind the Harris Teeter on West Annandale. Is that something that we are on top of and will address?
Yes, let me get back with council on the timeline for getting that fixed.
Okay. And likewise, Mr. Shields, I think I already was in touch with you about the streetlight pole outage, essentially all the way from Haycock down to Spring Street. Just for the public's awareness, I mean, maybe it helps now that we're in daylight savings time, but it's pretty dark. And maybe in the mornings, I guess, is where it would be helpful. But do we have an ETA on when all those streetlights will be restored?
So it should be not a long time to get light going on those. With one of the poles that got hit, there was a live wire problem that just needs to be secured by our contractor who takes care of those things. So I'll get back with a date. I don't think that's going to be a prolonged outage.
I was hoping that when I come back to Falls Church tomorrow, they'd be back on, but it was very dark when I left last week. Thank you. That's it.
Mr. Duncan?
Just had a question. The town hall or forum on T-zones is the 21st, is that right?
That's correct. It's Tuesday night, the 21st.
And what? 7:30? And where is that?
It'll be here in council chambers.
Okay, thanks.
Ms. Conley?
I just have one thing, and it's actually for Mr. Shrizzi. I just want to make sure you got an invitation, and others in the community, to the electric bus ribbon cutting tomorrow. Did you receive that invitation? Tomorrow, as the chair of the ESC, you are invited to attend the electric bus ribbon cutting, which is in front of Oak Street Elementary School at 10 a.m. So if you're available, you can get a ride on an electric bus. Anyone else is welcome to attend as well.
All right. Let's move on to the report of the city manager, Mr. Shields.
Thank you. And just one, I've got a couple of things to report on, but I will address the Park Avenue Great Streets project. Those plans are in with VDOT at the 60% level of design, as was noted earlier in public comments. And I do want to see if we can sit down together with members of the CACT and the ESC just to talk about that process. And so invitations will go out for that discussion. We're trying to set a date that will be mutually convenient for that. Has already been noted, we have the T-Zones Town Hall, which is scheduled for Tuesday, March 21st, here in City Council chambers. I need to check of whether that's at 7 o'clock or 7:30. I had seen something, it was at 7 o'clock, but if it... Okay, it's at 7:30 p.m. And we look forward to engaging the community on that zoning proposal. I will just note for the council's awareness, we do have a technical team that is working through that with the city attorney, with our planning staff, with DPW staff, which includes arborist and stormwater, to have a series of workouts just so that when we do get code language before city council at upcoming meetings, that anything we bring to you will have been vetted by our technical staff. With respect to the Eden Center and the East End area plan, the pop-ups that are scheduled in the Eden Center, we've given public notice for those on March 8th. It's a series of pop-ups, and the dates will be on March 18th from 11 to 4, and then March 22nd from 1 to 5, March 29th from 1 to 5, and then April 22nd from 11 to 4. And each one of those will have sort of a different way of engaging to try to encourage people to think about the future of the Eden Center, what we love about the Eden Center, and what we want to protect and preserve, and where are some things that, where some investments could be made in the area of transportation and the area of green space, other amenities that would be helpful and useful to the community, including housing, just in terms of the larger East End area plan, what the public's view is on including housing in that part of the city in the future as well. So we look forward to engaging with community on that at those series of pop-up meetings. The last thing I will note is the capital improvements program will be presented to the City Council along with the budget on March 27th. We do have a video that reflects the CIP as approved or recommended by the Planning Commission that will help get the word out to the public about what's in the CIP and what the capital planning means in the City of Falls Church as a setup for much more detailed discussion that we'll have with the city council in late March and throughout the month of April, and with adoption slated for May 8th. But that 6-year capital plan, so much of what we talk about and what we hear from community about investments in transportation and stormwater and public facilities and in those big areas, that the CIP really is where we set our direction in each of those critical areas. So that's what I have to report tonight. Happy to answer any questions.
All right, any questions? I'll ask one briefly. So those pop-ups are scheduled for like 5 hours, something like that. What's the schedule within that window? Do you know?
So I have asked our lead planner, Emily Bazemore, to get a little bit more granular, just so the public will know what will be happening at different times from 11 to 4, for instance, for that first one, and also the city council, so you know if you can't come for the full session, what would be a targeted time. So we'll get more information out to you on that.
All right, thank you. All right, unless anyone has anything else, let's move on to business on the agenda. Will you call the first item, Madam Clerk?
Yes. We have TO 23-02, ordinance to amend ordinances 2024, 2045, and 2056 regarding the budget of expenditures and revenues, appropriating funds for the fiscal year 2023 for the general fund, the school operating fund, school community services fund, the cable access fund, and the capital improvements program funds. And this item is on second reading and public hearing.
All right, thank you, Ms. Palma.
Good evening, Mayor Tarter, members of the council. We have for you the second reading of the second budget amendment in fiscal year 2023. And there are no changes to the second reading since the first reading on February 27th. And in short, this budget amendment requests appropriation of some general fund dollars for the city side and the FCC TV fund, and funding for 2 CIP projects using prior year proceeds in lieu of and interest income in lieu of debt, appropriation of grants and reimbursements, and movement of a department based on realignment with the functionalities. And on the school side, it requests appropriation of one-time revenue share funds, leftovers from the fiscal year 2022 pandemic grants, in the amount of $613,000, and carry forwards in the amount of $290,000. The school staff provided responses to council questions from the first reading that were sent to council earlier today, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to address those.
All right. Ms. Hardy, I see your hand's up, but I think it's been up since your last question. Did you have a question?
No, I just didn't lower it. I will do that now.
Okay, let's open up to questions from either you or anyone else on council. Are there any questions? Mr. Duncan?
Ms. Bauer, could you just give an executive summary of the email that came this afternoon about the expenditures from the fund balance at the end of FY22?
Yes, sure. So the schools normally request appropriation of year-end dollars as part of the next year's budget amendment. The next year's budget development, sorry. Use of these dollars was included in their fiscal year 2024 budget. However, there are projects in there such as funding for the demographer, funding for baseball field improvements, and then the pandemic grant funded positions that they could start drawing down now and get the work started prior to July 1st. So in a way to expedite those appropriations, these are being brought forward as part of this budget amendment. And there was a question on the fund balance. So as of the end of fiscal year 2023, the schools have a fund balance of $1.7 million. That's the projection. The fiscal year 2024 budget, the school budget, proposes use of $957,000 of that, bringing the remaining balance to $758,000 in 2024. So that is well within their policy, the fund balance.
That was my next question. So what is their policy or our handshake agreement on the cap of carry forward money?
The revenue share is, we divvy it up 50/50, the one-time tax dollars, general fund tax dollars, but on the fund balance, their policy is having a balance of about 2% of their total annual expenditures. And if they were to have more, they would come up with a plan to draw them down.
So 2% of total annual expenditures on their side is 50-ish million something?
Their annual budget is about 57 million, so 56, 57, so 2% is a little over about $1 million, I want to say.
So the reason I'm pursuing these questions is just so we here on council have a, rule of thumb to go by. If there appears to be something in excess of $1 million and carry forward, then we need to pay timely and close attention and cooperate and communicate very deliberately with the folks at the schools to make sure that we're doing our job here to make sure that, expenditures are checked through.
Correct.
So do you feel like the space we're at right now meets those standards? I guess that's my bottom line question.
I do, because they have a planned use of a good portion of that fund balance in 2024 budget, and that brings them at a balance of $760,000, which is well below their 2%.
Okay, and then going forward, one final question. The ARPA money and other extraordinary events have occurred in the last 3 years now, affecting these numbers, I think, some. Would it seem likely or unlikely that in future years, we might have $1 million washing around and carry forward, or is that number likely through the normal processes of, submitting budgets, screening them, voting on them, and so forth, that number would be lower than $1 million?
At this point, we did see our second quarter report, so we are expected to end the year on the revenues if it continues this way with a little bit of overage on the revenue side that we saw at the second quarter. So that will result in sharing that one-time money at the end of fiscal year 2023 as well. And talking about coming to your point on the ARPA positions, the city, the general government has 3 FTEs in the budget that are ARPA funded, and the schools have 4.5 FTEs that are ARPA and their other pandemic grant funded. So as part of the fiscal year 2025 and future budgets, we need to address replacing those one-time funds with ongoing funds.
Positions that are funded basically by one-time money that
Correct.
is carried on to be a second time and a third time even, maybe.
Correct.
Okay. Last question is escaping my mind right now. Sorry. Anyway, okay. I think that's basically all that I wanted to clarify. If I think of the other question, I'll throw it in. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Ms. Hardy?
Thank you. Mr. Duncan asked the first half of my question, which is I think I saw from the memo that we got from the schools, it was 4.5 FTEs. And Ms. Bawa, I think I heard you say it was 3 FTEs on the general government side?
That's correct.
That are paid with one-time money. And so that's 7.5 total across the entire city. What is the dollar amount equal to? Is that about 900,000?
I don't want to guess, but we'll bring that to you as part of the proposed budget when we come on March 27th.
Is that something that you said we have to solve for in FY25? Or when do we have to solve?
We have to solve it by FY25, yes.
Okay.
Well, we can encumber these funds till December of 2024, so they will be funded for a good portion of fiscal year 2025, but not all the way through, so.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I just thought of my other, Mr. Mayor. May
Oh, you're too late.
Okay.
Do we have any other questions? Okay, good.
Been great talking to you.
All right, Phil, go for
We're
it.
both fired. How much is a penny on the tax rate this coming budget cycle, do we estimate?
I'm sorry, could you
How
repeat?
much?
What's a penny on the
What's a
tax
penny
rate?
on the tax rate throw off?
It's
470?
550,
550.
yeah.
550. So the money we're talking about here is in some vicinity of 2 cents on the tax rate. Is that roughly correct?
Their fund balance, you mean?
Yeah.
No, the one-time
FTEs.
positions or the?
No. I'm talking about the carry forward amount of money, however it is.
The fund balance policy on the school side, yeah. If you want to look at it that way, sure.
Yeah, well, you know, that's how I look at it, so.
But you also want to keep in mind that in every year annual budget that the school proposes, they almost always have planned use of a portion of that fund balance.
I'm sure,
So-
absolutely,
So we like to keep a buffer just in case.
absolutely. I've seen that movie many times, and, you know, understandable. I mean, I'm just trying to
Sure.
set the stage here. Okay, thanks.
Other questions or comments? Any member of the public wish to speak to this matter? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Do we have a motion anyone would like to make? Oh, well, I guess we'll,
I'll move to adopt TO 23-02.
Second.
so Ms. Hiscott on the second, it's her birthday present from all of us.
Thank you, thank you.
Madam Clerk, do you want to go ahead and read, or go do this vote?
Yes, yes, sir. Ms. Conley,
Yes.
Mr. Duncan,
Yes,
Ms. Hardy,
Yes.
Ms. Leon,
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott,
Yes.
Mr. Snyder,
Yeah.
and Mayor Tarter.
Yes?
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, council.
All right, next item.
And the next item we have is TR 23-09, resolution to grant a waiver of sewer connection fees, the availability charge for the property located at 111 Tinner Hill Road.
Mr. Shields?
Thank you. So the title is pretty self-explanatory. The connection fee is in the amount of just over $7,000. The city is working with Fairfax County to provide public assistance for a number of public improvements at this property, including connecting to public water and sewer. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, any questions from anyone? Any member of the public wish to speak to this matter? Seeing none, the matter is closed.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask one question?
Yes, of course.
It's the same question I asked last Monday. So the value of the property is bound to, seem to me, increase. How are we feeling about the folks who are in this property and may face a higher property tax bill because of the improvements that we're carrying forward here?
So that is a potential outcome of this. However, the current situation is untenable, and the owner and the occupant do want it rectified.
Okay.
And so we're trying to assist them with that.
Okay, I'm all for it. Just for the record, they, might be facing, pay us later if not pay us now, but obviously it's something we need to do. Okay, thanks.
Do we have a motion anyone would like to make?
Motion to adopt TR 23-09.
All right.
Second.
Ms. Hardy on the second. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley,
Yes.
Mr. Duncan,
Yes,
Ms. Hardy,
Yes.
Ms. Leon,
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott,
Yes.
Mr. Snyder,
Yes.
and Mayor Tarter.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
All right, let's keep going.
Yes, we have TR 23-10, resolution of the City of Falls Church City Council approving the city's participation in the proposed settlement of opioid-related claims against Teva, Allergan, Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, and their related corporate entities, and directing the city attorney to execute the documents necessary to effectuate the city's participation in the settlements.
All right. Mr. City Attorney, you going to handle this?
Yes, thank you, Council. Brief staff report. This item's a follow-on to actions taken by the Council in November of 2021. I won't go over that long history, but essentially, the Council approved the city's participation in the Virginia Opioid Abatement Fund and Settlement Allocation MOU. In addition, by separate resolution, the council approved the city's participation in the settlement of certain opioid-related litigation claims nationally with certain named manufacturers and distributors. So tonight, this is what I would call the second phase of these settlements. So the Commonwealth and other states and municipalities around the country have reached recommended settlements with some additional manufacturers and distributors of opioid products, and the names are listed here. I don't necessarily need to go over them unless you want to. So by maximizing participation of the Virginia jurisdictions, what this does is it ensures that the largest potential flow of funds goes to the Commonwealth and then to the Opioid Authority, and then to municipalities such as the City of Falls Church. And as may have been noted in November of 2021, I wasn't here then, but the city was not a participant in the litigation. However, the terms of the settlement worked to the benefit of the City of Falls Church and other jurisdictions that weren't direct participants, because every jurisdiction in Virginia that ended up participating gets a flow of funds. Of course, the jurisdictions that actually participated in the litigation get slightly increased numbers, but over the course of the years that these funds will be flowing, the city will get its share of funds. In the staff report as well, I noted that the authority's work has begun, and staff will report back as appropriate on potential use of these funds. Also wanted to draw attention to the numbers. So we're not talking about tremendous sums directly coming to the city. To date, the city has received approximately a little below $30,000, and the current numbers would allocate $167,417 to the city through FY 2039. So the payments come out over a number of years. Where the benefits will accrue to the residents of the city will be the distributions that come from the Opioid Abatement Authority. And the jurisdictions, the authority has ramped up. It's starting to work. One of the attachments to the staff report was a slide presentation, and I would draw the public's attention to that if they have an interest in reading through it, and for your benefit as well. One of the things to note is that most of these funds are in fact restricted. They need to be used for abatement purposes, and there are examples in here of what those funds may be used for. So I would expect city staff to be working toward maximizing the potential of these relatively small funds in the context of what the city is receiving, but perhaps leveraging them with adjacent jurisdictions or through targeted programs. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, but we would recommend approval. The last round, we had almost a 100% participation rate among Virginia jurisdictions, which was actually among the highest of any of the states in the country. So happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions? Mr. Snyder?
I guess the most obvious question is, what if we don't pass this ordinance?
So the practical effect is that the direct payments to the City of Falls Church probably would not be coming on these settlements, but the city would continue as a participant in the Opioid Abatement Authority, receive certain funds going on. I can't quantify what the actual numbers would be. The recommendations by the Attorney General and by those representing other jurisdictions is that we're trying to maximize the numbers so that the state gets the most money possible, and by inference that the dollars then flow down. But I can't tell you exactly what would happen if you didn't participate. I'm just saying that since the city agreed to participate in the first round without being in active litigation, that from my perspective, there really is no downside in participating. But certainly it's in your prerogative to decide not to participate if you don't want to.
All right, other questions or comments? Any member of the public wish to speak to this matter? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Additional questions, comments? If not, is there a motion? Yes.
I'm just curious, there are obviously limitations on what can be done with this money. It's not just a blank check.
That is correct. Now, some of the funds that are coming to the Commonwealth are unrestricted. The majority of funds obviously come with conditions. Those were part of the negotiations. Actually, part of the original negotiations, the distributors and manufacturers wanted to try to ensure that all of the funds were to be used exclusively for opioid abatement. And I think correctly, a number of the states wanted to also ensure that even if something wasn't directly for opioid abatement, that you could still use the funds for things that were fairly close, fairly similar. So, but yes, and again, I commend to the slide deck that was attached to the staff report has 2 or 3 pages on sort of what abatement might mean. And staff continues to work through all of that. And I'm sure we'll be reporting back at an appropriate time.
All right, do we have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt TR 23-10.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Snyder on the second. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item.
We have TR 23-11, resolution in support of capital area food banks, congressionally directed spending request of $1.68 million to support the reconstruction of its Lorton, Virginia facility.
Mr. Shields? Oh, Ms.
Good
Lester?
evening, Council. The resolution that's before you is, as the title indicated, to support the federal request that the Capital Area Food Bank put in. It's a regional entity, as you all know, that serves the city of Falls Church as well as our neighboring localities. This is a federal request that went into Senator Warner's office as well as Kane and Wexton. Staff recommends this adoption by council of this resolution supporting the grant. There's no local additional match. As council will recall, in FY23, you did appropriate $175,000 for the City of Falls Church share to this new facility and construction. Glad to answer any questions in addition to what's in your staff report.
All right, any questions? Any member of the public wish to speak to this matter? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Ms. Leon?
Yeah, just, Steve, just a quick question. How did our contribution of $175K, how was that derived against the 1.68 that was directed?
The 1.68 is just part of the construction cost. At the time of the $175,000, there was no federal grant application, but the total construction cost is done on a pro rata share for the Northern Virginia localities that have a direct benefit either directly to our clients or to nonprofits in the city. So it was a pro rata share.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Snyder, did you want to make a motion or do you have a comment?
No, I wanted to make a motion, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
I move approval of TR 23-11.
Second.
Ms. Leon on the second. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we're up to our work session. So we're going to shift gears and move on to our work session. And this is on our neighborhood traffic calming program. Who's going to be handling this, Mr. Shields?
So I'll make just a brief introductory remark, but Ms. Carrie Odanino is our lead planner who's worked with the CACT on this update. And so what the request is tonight is to just provide some feedback on this update to the Neighborhood Traffic Calming Program Handbook, which governs how we handle resident requests for traffic calming on residential streets. The last time we did a major redo of this handbook was in 2015. On the council work plan was a more narrow gauge request to update the work plan to deal with some questions about roles and responsibilities and communication, particularly once decisions get made after the voting on traffic calming measures, how that gets communicated out to the residents on the street. In the 2015 plan, we relied on the block captains, on the residents who had sort of chosen their block leader to take the lead in those communications back to their neighbors in terms of what improvements, whether it's speed bumps or chicanes or other types of traffic calming, were agreed to and where they would go. And the request was that staff actually provide that direct communication and then work with the neighborhood during construction to resolve any issues that happen actually during construction. So that was, I think, the council discussion about the update initially. And engaging with the CACT, there's some sort of a broader discussion about the program, and so Carrie's going to tell us about that. The bottom line is we'd like council's feedback tonight and then to schedule this update for an adoption by resolution at your next meeting on March 27th. Ms. Odanino, thank you for all your work on this, and thank you for your report tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Shields. Hi, I'm Carrie Odanino. Good evening, Mayor Tarter, members of City Council. So council has requested to review staff recommendations for the Neighborhood Traffic Calming Program Handbook update. As Mr. Shields noted, the council's adopted work plan calls for an update to the NTC handbook to reflect feedback following recent projects. And the city last updated the NTC handbook in 2015. A resolution to incorporate these proposed updates is currently scheduled for consideration at the March 27th regular meeting. In terms of project scope, Council had requested that the CACT and NTC staff review and revise the NTC handbook, accordingly, staff has focused the proposed updates on roles and responsibilities, especially in communicating project status and decisions. So in terms of process to date, SWOT analyses were held with both the CACT and city staff members working on the NTC program in October. Following the work sessions, requests to changes to the program were categorized and appear in the staff report as easy fix, in scope, and future item. So in scope items here including reaffirming the steps already in the NTC program handbook, adding spray paint and walkthroughs, posting of signs, taking advantage of electronic solutions, providing monthly status updates of all NTC projects, reaffirming CACT meetings as a forum for suggestion of improvements and getting involved, and providing guidance to working group members and for community meeting formats and easy fix items, including transparency about the process after a request is made, small tweaks and adjustments to the threshold for percentage of respondents with voting, the NTC quarterly report, update to the prioritization formula, and future items, larger efforts that could be undertaken separately, such as Vision Zero, standard design for different street types. Text reviews were held at work sessions January through March. Changes were made, including a condensed table of contents to one page on page 1, minor tweaks to language in the neighborhood working group section on page 5, a new section providing additional clarification about roles and responsibilities on page 6, adjusted language around voting percentage on page 7, new language around implementation procedures on page 9, minor tweaks to language in the traffic control section on page 10, the addition of phone number and email in the neighborhood petition form on page 13, minor tweaks to language in the neighborhood petition form on page 13, adjustments to the case prioritization formula, pages 16 through 17, and minor tweaks to the language in the traffic calming toolbox section, pages 20 through 21. In addition to the work sessions, individual CACT members provided comments via email, which were incorporated to the extent they were consistent with the notes from the SWOT analyses and scope of work in the council work plan. In addition to that, in terms of consideration for future policy updates, during the CACT meeting last week, members raised the following items to consider for future city policy initiatives: establishing residential street design standards, adopting a citywide Vision Zero policy, adopting a complete streets policy, developing a residential sidewalk program and/or adding sidewalks to the NTC program, and consideration for a top-down approach to designing and implementing neighborhood traffic calming. And then in terms of timing, as I noted before, action is currently scheduled for the March 27th regular meeting. I'd be happy to take any questions at this time or sort of go into more detail.
All right, thank you very much. Let's see if there's any questions here on the dais. Mr. Duncan.
Just to kick things off, Carrie, the consideration of a top-down administrative approach to designing and implementing neighborhood traffic calming that you mentioned on line 103. Can you say a little bit more about that? I mean, is that, would that be structurally very different from what we have now? Or what do they have in mind when they mention that?
It came up a couple of times at the work sessions with CACT. There's concern that some situations that are that pose a safety threat don't end up being addressed because of the process that's currently in place with the voting and the petitions. And the idea was proposed that perhaps either CACT or staff could just, if there is sort of like a strong safety need, just sort of proceed with improvements without the whole process.
Interesting.
And one thing I would just say is if there's ever a safety deficiency that the city engineer has identified, then that would be handled administratively to ensure that the roadways are safe. The neighborhood traffic calming is generally enhanced safety that goes beyond what an engineer would say meets standards. And so it is a discretionary decision. And the whole process is geared to make sure that before we proceed with those discretionary improvements, that the neighborhood truly does support them. We do have history in the city before this program where we would put in improvements thinking that this is what the residents wanted, and then other residents would very strongly come and say that they want them taken out. And so we've tried to avoid that with this program. And so that's a little bit of additional context.
Okay, that's helpful. Another thought that came to my mind is retaining the memory of traffic calming measures that we've implemented that went away over time for reasons that are lost to the mist of mystery. Thinking just on West Street, for instance, there used to be rumble strips that alerted people to the stop sign that was coming up at the intersection of Parker and West. Somewhere along the line, they wore down. We had a short budget year. 2 or 3 years passed, and all of a sudden, there's no rumble strips, and nobody can remember ever having them. So in terms of holding ground that we've gained, because they were useful, they were not obtrusive, they didn't, annoy the neighbors, they just went away. But holding ground that we've gained is something that I would suggest that, we have an inventory or something that has us go back and restore features when paving gets done or painting gets done. That's just one example I can think of. I'm sure there are others in town. And to the Harris Teeter flashing light, to me, I feel like I should have brought that up some time ago. I feel like that's not been working for a while. And that does seem like a pretty serious safety issue. So anything that CACT can do to elevate through their ears and eyes around town situations like that to our attention would be useful.
All right, thank you. Ms. Hardy?
Thank you. Thank you for the updates, Ms. Odonino. So I read through the staff report recommendations and the red line in the new NTC manual. And I guess a broader question I have. So as expected, the CACT provided us very thorough and thoughtful recommendations in their SWOT analysis of what I think are opportunities and recommendations. Taking more of a 10,000 foot view, do we think that the red line edits in the process appropriately address and adequately address all the opportunities identified? And I guess I would ask whether the CACT has provided us thoughts on that. If this is our opportunity to kind of make the NTC process better, do the recommended changes tackle all the opportunities identified by the CACT?
There is one committee member with some remaining concerns, and we do have sort of a call scheduled later this week to do a page turn. Most of them are not, don't appear to be sort of huge changes. But I do think, the majority of what was brought up is in there. I do feel like it's, it's the updates do reflect sort of most of what was brought up.
Okay. I guess for the items that we don't think we can either tackle now in this phase, I guess I would ask, is there a NTC 3.0? And I guess to Mr. Duncan's kind of earlier question, I guess when I think about NTC, there certainly was a time and place for why we did a bottoms-up approach, right? We wanted to make sure the neighborhood was on board with it. I still think that we have a need for a bottoms-up driven improvement process. As I read through the comments of what the CACT believed was an opportunity with our transportation safety kind of portfolio of projects is I think they want to see more holistic solutions. So I think there's room for both a bottoms-up process and maybe Wyatt, to what you mentioned earlier, that there's probably administrative solutions that do happen right now, maybe more visibility into how much those can take care of the broader issues that people see, as well as the rapid response team. So the combination of the feedback says, hey, we need more light and nimble solutions. We need more holistic solutions. And the third prong of this is we need a bottoms-up neighborhood-driven process. So not relying on NTC to take care of everything, but I think people would, based on the comments I read in the staff report, as well as the edits, I think having the other two prongs to address transportation safety would, I think, address a lot of things that may come from the CACT and what they desire to see. Does that make sense?
It does, I think so. And so the capital improvements program is one other vehicle where, the city sets policy on transportation improvements, and they're quite significant. One other example on the Greenway Downs project, which is a grant-funded project, we did make the decision that the sidewalk widening and the intersection improvements would be city-driven and not up for vote by the residents. And the voting process was really geared towards the speed bumps and things put in the street to slow traffic down kind of mid-block. That we focused the voting on that. So that's an example, I think, of where some of it is driven by city policy, and others we try to keep the voting process for.
Yeah, and so that's a great segue, because my last comment actually has to do with, I think, future opportunities. So I, in particular, am interested in adopting a complete streets policy as well as the Vision Zero policy. So as I think about Dave Gustafson's comments to us in the annual report that he gave, I guess, last week or 2 weeks ago, I would love to get to a point where anytime we touch a street, whether it's just regular repaving work or Fairfax Water is doing work, that we take that opportunity to update the street to those standards. Just like how, for example, we touch streetscape. We have streetscape standards. Anytime we touch the street, we try to make sure the sidewalks get widened or we have underground wires. I would love to get to that point with the rest of our street infrastructure so that slowly over time we've upgraded our infrastructure rather than keep things status quo and then have to go back in with a later project. I think the bar should be, why aren't we updating it to include better sidewalks, a bike lane, bike infrastructure, et cetera? And so I think if adopting a complete streets kind of policy helps us get there, I'm certainly interested in it, as well as getting to Vision Zero, where we really commit to having zero traffic safety deaths in town. That's it. Thank you.
Mr. Snyder?
Thanks a lot. Carrie, could you bring up the priority list? What is it, pages 13 or something like that? Just a quick review of that.
Let me just get to that. 1 second.
Thanks for your work, by the way, and that of CACT.
Oh. I think. Okay. So you wanted the priority list or the petition or?
Yeah, case prioritization.
Case priorities. Okay. Sorry.
So is this carried over or is this new?
Oh, see, the formula. Yeah, so there was discussion around sort of not really there was a lot going on with the previous formula and a desire to simplify it, to make it more sort of easy, like to make it easier to use. So the previous formula calculated the daily risk of severe pedestrian injury. The current formula simply takes average daily vehicle volume and percent chance of severe pedestrian injury and multiplies it to generate an NTC score. It still sorts into bins of low, medium, and high. It removed a couple of factors. So it removed the number of pedestrian crashes per 100,000, 100 million vehicle miles traveled, and also the sort of the study area length is also removed, and so it's just sort of a single point within each of the study areas, and so that's basically what it does differently.
Okay, thanks. So if you go back a page or two, you sort of list the priority there. Motor vehicle speed, motor vehicle volume, design deficiencies, and proximity to pedestrian generators. Those are all good. How about the data about where collisions or near collisions are occurring? Because sometimes the only difference between a near collision and a collision is just luck. And you can't rely on luck. So I'm wondering if that's baked into the priority list at all. I'm thinking about a video that my neighbors took of a stop sign at Maple and Great Falls Street, which was pretty graphic in the number of people that are running the stop sign and the number of collisions. So is that worked in here somewhere? And that's probably true like every stop sign in the city.
So it no longer compares because it doesn't have that comparison by length factor. It's not necessarily going to as evenly compare the different study areas. And in terms of pedestrian generators, I would say that's sort of not really included with the formula.
Okay, well, my one recommendation might be to add that as a component part. If you're getting high collisions or near collisions in particular intersections or particular areas, that might be relevant. I don't disagree with any of the priorities that you have here. So thanks a lot. Just a comment about the holistic approach. I think the Vision Zero is a way to make sure that we're getting all the key components. It's not just the roadway, although that's important, but it's driver behavior and how are we controlling that and what's enforcement. And I think we're fortunate that our police are still making traffic stops because, as someone once said, nothing deters better than a blue light. So So I'm glad to see that. But these are all component parts of dealing with traffic safety. Public communication is another part. I mean, I'd love to communicate to people, you know, if you want to speed, go somewhere else, because we're going to get you. Something like that. Or like education within our own community, things like that. So the Vision Zero, I think, is the traffic calming programs and all the streets related, but also includes behavioral issues and education issues and public communication issues and law enforcement issues. So anyway, I think it's a good idea to do that. And ask the city manager, do you think there's some value in that? Or, I mean, I don't want to take up yet creating another plan, you know, if it doesn't make sense. Do you see some value to sort of a holistic approach here?
So I think the city is taking a holistic approach. The NTC is one part of that holistic approach. I do think it's important to think about all of the investments we're making through the CIP. The approach earlier talked about every time we touch a street to try to take a complete street approach. I think we can make some more progress on that. Just as one example, when Fairfax Water puts in a new water main, we do now make them redo the sidewalks and the handicap ramps so that they're compliant with today's ADA requirements. We've been able to get that without just forcing the utility companies to do that. To get them to change it, to make it so now there's a bump out or a pedestrian facility, or to change the street, then you're into a whole different type of contractual relationship with them. And so we've pushed them very hard for ADA compliance, but I get the frustration. Sometimes we'll repave a complete street with new water mains, et cetera, but we didn't do bump outs or sort of shrink things down for traffic calming or put in speed humps or other things just because that wasn't in the scope of that particular project. So I think that's worthy of a additional internal discussion and get back to council on whether we could change, press further on that.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of using this as a springboard, though, to bring in these other components, public education, public communication. I know we passed the 20-mile-per-hour speed limit ordinance. I know we're going to be putting that in place with signs, whatever. But I do think there's some value in looking at these other component parts as well in terms of an overall approach. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Conley?
Thank you, Mayor Tarter. Thank you, Ms. Odanino. I have a number of questions, mostly related to community engagement. And here's my concern with the neighborhood traffic calming, which I've said at numerous points in the last couple of years, but it's the unevenness of the neighborhood representatives, that these people are volunteers and they all communicate in different ways. So I live in the Greenway Downs neighborhood, and I tried really hard to just be a regular old resident and not get involved in how the information was communicated, because I thought I'd experiment and see what that felt like. And it was actually impossible because every street had a different way of doing it, which again, you're leaving up to volunteers. So one street had a really good email list, and one street had a person who just wanted to knock on doors, which meant he only talked to the people who were home when he knocked on the doors. And one street wanted to do, so every street did it differently. And then so staff is doing one thing, but people are hearing different things. So that really made it confusing. So then I was getting messages from people on my street, can you believe this? What's going on? What's going on? And I, again, was trying to be a resident, but several times had to get involved to send an email out to my street because the person who was the designated representative wasn't communicating that way, but that's what those people wanted to hear. So I'm not saying he did a bad job. I'm just saying his method of communicating was different than what the expectation was. So I feel like there needs to be some sort of standard for the volunteers. This is what is expected of you. We had a similar problem over on Shadow Walk when the person who was in charge just didn't tell half the neighborhood. And then city staff had to send out letters to the neighborhood, and people got caught up late and didn't understand. And so I think that process, it would be really important. It's important to put at the beginning, what are the expectations for communication from the person who is selected as the neighborhood representative? Like basic standards or baseline standards, or you have to show that you've done this. Because that's something that, again, happens differently depending upon who the neighborhood person is. So that is my first concern. As I look at I just flipped to the Greenway Downs website. It would be great if there was a schedule that was very easy for neighbors to understand. Because I just looked at this and I thought, oh, I wanted to send in a comment, and there's not a deadline on there. If you have a comment on this meeting from the 7th, get it, here's how you submit it, and get this date in and do it now, and here's the email address. I got to flip back and look through my paperwork to find out who I'm supposed to send that email to. So that sort of ease of communication would be that the staff would have to do would be very helpful, I think, to making sure that the neighborhood feels like they're heard. And then the voting question, which I think is pretty clear in your documents. It just isn't, again, the neighborhood representatives had different stories about how it was going to be implemented. So one person said, oh, only owners of properties get to vote. And other people said, no, anyone who lives here gets to vote. And that part, it just needed to be clearer, because I feel like the people care passionately about where they live, but they also only have this much bandwidth to care. So we have to spoon feed them the information so that what they care about is easy for them to understand, and they're not having to dig through and find those details. So another example of that is on page 28, where you've got some photos of speed humps. It would be great if the actual speed humps that we use in the City of Falls Church were in there. So you could say to someone, if you vote for speed humps, you're going to get this kind. Not, you might get one of these 3 kinds or 2 kinds, but this is the kind. And if you want to go over to Lee Street and drive on Lee Street, then you'll feel what they feel like. So just add some examples. Like that's a Fort Worth, Texas one, but since we have plenty of speed humps in Falls Church, it would just be great to give people that example. And then the other piece that would be very helpful, I think, to people is a lot of times people just think speed humps, that's all I got. But you have a really nice array of options. And I think those options were presented in Greenway Downs anyway to the neighborhood working group. But then they didn't actually all get filtered again to the people who live there. So they had a discussion and thought, oh, these things might work. Let's go out and talk about it. But different people talked about it in different ways, because some people said, oh, I know what a chicane is. And other people in the room had no idea. And they all sort of insert at different times to understand exactly what's going on. And then my last question is, as we think about those holistic neighborhood situations, which are a really good way to do it, the way the Greenway Downs one has ended up is that, you know, there are 5 streets that are perpendicular to Route 29 and connect through the neighborhood. And of those streets, one of them has a cul-de-sac, so that wasn't even included in the study. And now those neighbors showed up last week and said, well, why weren't we included? We get traffic too. So they're upset that they weren't included. And then of the other streets, one of them, the neighbor said, no, we don't want speed humps. But everybody else said, yes, we want speed humps. So if it ends up being voted on the way it is, then we're doing exactly what we said we didn't want to do, which is not have one street, you know, without speed humps while the rest of the neighborhood has them. So how do you, that sort of discrepancy is tricky. So if there's a vote on what we have now, then one street won't even get to vote yes or no on speed humps. They'll just get to vote no on not speed humps. And that's not a true vote, I would think. But also, suppose you do the whole thing and one street says yes, or three say yes and one says no, then does the city have any jurisdiction to say, well, that doesn't make sense? Like, if more than half the streets vote yes on speed humps, then everybody gets them. Is that something that we could say?
I think the premise was that if one of the streets of those 6 streets said we don't want speed humps, that's the way it would be. So 5 would get them and 1 would not. I understand what you're saying.
Right.
We would follow the vote.
But if people don't know all the parameters, what they're voting on, so let's just assume that one street ends up not getting street humps, right? Then they're going to immediately get way more traffic and want speed humps. So the conditions are changing. So all of a sudden, that one street is going to have much more traffic than they did before. But they're not all, like, I understand that, but the 40 other properties, no, they're not all going to understand what that means. So is there a way to vote that isn't thumbs up, thumbs down? It's a vote of, I don't want speed humps, I do want speed humps, I only want speed humps if everyone else has speed humps, or something along those lines, so that it makes more sense. And again, I'm just trying to make it make sense for the people that only have this much bandwidth to understand. Does that make sense?
It does. I tend to think that people they need to think those things through, and probably the simplest thing is, do you want speed humps or not? And, for each, this is kind of where they would be, and this is what they would look like. I think those points are very well taken, so people know what they're voting for. But the way we've set this up, we would follow the will of each street. Now, there are intersection improvements around Oak Street School and things like that again, we're going to do kind of with grant dollars, and those were not subject to the vote.
Right, I know that. Anyway, so my concern, I'm using Greenway Downs as an example, but it's more of I don't want to just focus on Greenway Downs as a concern, but it's more of if we're going to really look and listen to what the neighbors want, we need to make sure the neighbors know what we're asking them and what their options are. So that would be my last suggestion. I think making all these improvements will definitely help, and we want to engage as many people as possible so that people aren't surprised and upset in the end.
All right. So I've got a couple questions or comments. Let me just ask a question I think I know the answer for. I presume in some ways this is an incredible amount of time to get solutions to these issues. Is that a fair statement? I mean, sort of the bang for the buck in some ways is very labor intensive, very staff intensive. Is that fair to say, like Mr. Shields?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I knew the answer. And so I guess I would like to hear some suggestions from you all, maybe not this second, but like how this process can be more efficient use of your time, right? Because my guess is if you think, let's attack a new street and it's going to take a zillion hours worth of time and bandwidth, you're probably not likely to want to jump into that. Maybe you go kicking and screaming or whatever, but it's not something you're walking, running towards. And so I think we need to find solutions that are more efficient use of time. Maybe there's streamlined solutions. Maybe there's best practices out there that we don't know about. In other words, this is first off, you go to this. Second, you go to this. Speed humps are last. After that is this are the solutions, as opposed to trying to kind of handcraft everything, maybe. I don't know, but my sense is that just listening to this conversation, and I've been through a little bit of this myself as well, that it's just a very inefficient exercise, and everybody feels highly personal about it, which is absolutely appropriate. And we all want the best for everybody, which is to get solutions and make sure everyone is safe, but people have different ideas how we get there. And so I guess I would just ask you if there's some ways that you think either other jurisdictions have done, whether they're best practices from any place. Hey, Seattle has this great program, but I'd be interested in ways that we can efficiently come up with solutions that aren't exhausting for staff. It feels like it really is a whole lot of effort for everybody, and more efficient ways to come up with solutions. And I don't know if having more in-house expertise, I don't know, what level of expertise we have. I think in some ways having someone in-house who's like an expert on bikes, an expert on pedestrian solutions, an expert on traffic calming, those are like three things we talk an awful lot about, whether it's review of new projects that come in and how they could be better for pedestrians and things like that, how it's better for solutions like this, how it's better for I don't know what. But having, I think, a little more in-house expertise for the kind of cutting-edge solutions, I think could be helpful in this as well. So this is just a few thoughts I have, but I've watched this enough to see, how it appears that it's just a difficult way to proceed, and I think finding a better solution or more efficient solution would probably be better for everyone. Anyway, does anyone else have any more comments? Mr. Duncan?
Carrie, we some time ago talked about the shortcut apps that steer people through town roads that we don't want them on. Has there been any, there was some talk that we would reach out to Waves and say, don't go down Nolan Street, or I just wonder if CACT has talked about that, if that's even allowable and if that's been discussed.
That did come up at the initial meeting, the SWOT analysis, but I'm not aware of sort of anything else happening with it.
Well, I guess I would suggest that there's a certain police officer in a nearby jurisdiction who reports that, Waves is sending traffic through backdoor Arlington neighborhoods that would amaze you, but that's the miracle of technology. And if the same thing is happening here, and there's anything we can do to, discourage it, because a lot of commuter pass-throughs they have no idea where they are. They're just following the app on the phone. And if we could get them to stop broadcasting streets like Noland as cut-throughs, that would be helpful. Also, micro-mobility, just in closing, because getting cars off the road would help by definition. Has there been any action movement to revive the pre-pandemic structure that we were setting up to encourage scooters?
There is not. Yeah, I mean, it's just as we left it in sort of early 2020.
Mm-hmm. We got to a fairly mature point. I mean, we were ready to ask for bids and so forth. I mean, I feel like it's something that could come off the shelf reasonably quickly if the notion got going up again.
It's a good idea. I think last time we went through this, we thought it was going to be pretty quick. And in fact, we spent probably a year and like 6 council meetings talking about it.
Yeah.
And then we kind of overcooked it. And what we put out to bid had too many rules and regulations on it. And the market didn't want to respond to it.
Yeah.
So there would need to be a commitment that, if we want them, we're not going to overdo it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would hope that, the landscape might have changed and experience might have taught us that too many hands on it is not a good thing. But I haven't heard anybody opposing it. I mean, there was some resistance or concern, I guess, about sidewalk, scooters and pedestrians, but that was seen as something that could be overcome. Anyway, it seems like something that ought to be part of our toolbox.
All right. Unless there's any other comments, we thank you for the fine work you've done to date and look forward to hearing more about this. And thank you so much. Let's go on to business not on the agenda. Are there any standing regional committees, reports, any council member comments that haven't been made yet would like to be made? If not, yes, Ms. Conley.
As the liaison to the library board, I want to remind everyone that the Library Foundation is having a fundraiser tomorrow at Harvey's from 3 to 9 to celebrate. It's the first anniversary of Harvey's, and it's a fundraiser for the MRSPL Foundation.
All right. Let's go on to approval of the minutes. Mr. Duncan?
Mr. Mayor, on the minutes of October 24th, 2022, line 114, the mayor asked the clerk to call the roll, except the mayor doesn't show up until the next page. So I think the vice mayor asked the clerk to call the roll there. And on line 254, let's see what that is. Gives residents, just a plural S for residents, and residents ample time. With that, I move approval of the minutes of October 24th, 2022 as amended.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. Is there anything else anyone would like to say before we adjourn? All right, we're adjourned. Oh, wait, before we do, there's one last thing. We have to do happy birthday to our friend. Is anybody up for singing happy birthday at this hour? All right, let's do it. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Debbie. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you to all you songbirds. for the love name.
Mr. Mayor, I think we should have adjourned before the music.
All right.
I'm not sure that recording is going to go viral anytime soon, but I really appreciate the thoughts.
All right. We're adjourned.